Welcome to Sports Beat KC, the sports podcast presented by the Kansas City Star. I'm your host, Blair Kirchhoff. We're on the road in the most unusual setting for Big 12 Media Days. I am actually sitting in the end zone of AT&T Stadium, home of the Dallas Cowboys, here in Arlington, Texas. This massive stadium is not only home to the Dallas Cowboys, but it's the site of the Big 12 football championship game, and next year's Media Day schedule was announced for this very venue. 5 teams met the media today, including Kansas, and we spent time with Coach Les Miles and some of the KU players. We'll spend this episode of Sports Beat KC breaking down the chatter when it comes to Jayhawks football. I didn't realize you have a starting streak, a consecutive game starting streak going on. How proud are you of that?
I'm very proud. It's hard work, mostly because football is such a taxing game, and you get banged up week to week. And there's been a couple weeks where you're like, I don't know, but every Saturday I've been able to get up and get myself right to go out there and help my team. 36
games and counting, right? It would be neat for Kansas to take that off the 12-game thing and maybe had a 13th. Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
What are the prospects in terms of you going into your senior year? You're confident going into any year, but now you're going into your senior year. There's a lot different about KU and about the staff. So why is this year going to be different?
I'd say this year is going to be different because I think there's a different culture. We got Coach Miles and us as leaders, the senior. We got a lot of senior, older guys, and I think we're ready and passing that knowledge and things that we know into the younger guys and getting them prepared and getting everybody ready so we can go out there and win.
What's different offensively with this new regime?
I think y'all be surprised what we do offensively. We got a lot of new stuff. I feel like Coach Miles and Coach K are bringing in, and I love it. It's just a lot more, I feel like, downhill stuff, and I think we're going to surprise a lot of people with it.
Tell me about the position group as a whole.
Position group as a whole is really strong. I feel like we have the best running back unit in the nation, really, between me, Pooka, and Dom. We got some freshmen that came in too, but as a whole, I feel like we got a really good unit, really strong unit that'll be able to balance each other out well.
That was Kansas offensive lineman Hakeem Adeniji and running back Khalil Herbert. They were part of the Kansas traveling party to Big 12 Media Days at Arlington, Texas. Jesse Newell, Kansas beat writer, is here on Sports Beat KC. And Jesse, like me, this is your first trip to Media Days at AT&T Stadium, home of the Dallas Cowboys. What did you think of the place?
It's huge. That's what you expect. I kind of felt small in life when I got underneath that big board that's at the 50-yard line that goes from the 20 to the 20. I'm thinking, how many Jessies would it take laid side by side to make up the length of this big board? A lot. But we'd been here one other time, Blair, but you'll have to help me about some Big 12 media event, because I have been here before, but it was for something else.
Oh, I'll tell you when you've been here,
okay,
my friend.
Go ahead.
I will tell you. The 2013 Midwest
now.
region?
Yes, KU Michigan is
yes.
Now I do remember this. That is exactly why I was here. So that makes sense. Yes, haven't been here for Media Day, but have been here for a basketball game, because that's what you do in huge football arenas.
I think they only used half of it for the basketball Midwest Regional, which spent only 40,000 seats available for basketball. So today was the first day of Big 12 Media Days, which meant Kansas was front and center. Well, they were first, I guess. Les Miles was the first coach to speak on stage. But, media days are about coaches and players coming to one site and chattering about the season, and everybody's optimistic and everybody feels good about the season. It's a different feeling for Kansas because there is a new coach, and I got that sense of excitement from the players that I talked to. I talked to the 4 players who are here from KU, and I wanted to get before we kind of drill down into the details, what were some of the general impressions you had from Les Miles and KU today?
Yeah, this is a different kind of feeling, Blair, but sort of a little bit the same, and I don't mean to bring up bad memories for KU fans by saying this, but, everybody when I talk to some certain people, I say, well, what about Les Miles being Kansas's coach? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that kind of a celebrity, sort of a different thing? And it's really not. I mean, that's what Charlie Weiss was a few years ago. And so, I mean, I've been on the beat long enough where that was the same sort of thing when Charlie Weiss came in here, and I was kind of like, whoa, Charlie Weiss is at Kansas, and we can go talk to him. So, KU
had Dave Campo as his defensive coordinator, former Cowboys head coach.
Yeah, and defensive coordinator too. So, it is. It's funny how history can kind of repeat itself, and very soon. Not to say that Les Miles and the Charlie Weiss tenures are going to have the same ending or results or process that one ended up as. But I think there was some intrigue with Les Miles. That's what you would expect at a media day, and I just kind of keep getting brought back to a conversation I had with a friend here, a few months ago, who basically said that KU football didn't need a shot in the arm. KU football needed a defibrillator. You know what I mean? And so when you need a defibrillator, you like when you come to Big 12 Media Days and there's some national media members hanging around your coach's table, and that there is some interest, and that people are kind of crowding around and shooting video of Les Miles, and that, him with a blue tie and with a Jayhawk, pin on his lapel, all those sorts of things. So I think there was interest in the program in that sort of way. We can call it artificial if you want, but there is intrigue about Les Miles and who he is and his personality and how all this is going to work at Kansas. And for right now, with the way the program has been, I think Jeff Long and the athletic director at KU and KU in general will take that as a good sign. Again, they'll have to prove with the results on the field, but this is sort of why they hired Les Miles a little bit, in the sense of it, is that he can come in here and people are going to have eyeballs going to him just because of his history and what he's done. And
to prove your point, I've been coming to these things for a long time, and no disrespect intended for David Beatty or Charlie Weiss or Turner Gill, the previous coaches to Les Miles since Mark Mangino, but I've never seen the media hang out with Les Miles to the extent I saw today, where media was waiting outside of doors, where he was conducting television interviews for Fox and ESPN. So every time he changed positions, there were reporters, often national reporters, that wanted to talk to him. A lot of topics to cover with Les Miles, and we'll, like I said, we'll get into that in a second. But sometimes KU coaches, when they're on the podium, they get 15 minutes up there and they run out of questions. That was not the case. Les Miles was taking questions. Pete, the moderator, had to cut it off.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is intrigue in that way with the football program. Again, I think there's just sort of this, memories of what Les Miles was at the end of his LSU tenure and some of the crazy antics that he's had. And there's some interest in KU football again from a national level, which, like I said before, I think some of that is what they wanted when they hired Les Miles. But as you spoke about, it's kind of a weird day too, because not only was the topic Les Miles in Kansas football, but KU obviously had a very on the top of the national radar story to talk about when it came to Les Miles and getting on the podium.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that, but let's hear what Les Miles had to say about the Pooka Williams suspension, which it turns out is going to be one game, the season opener against Indiana State, and then he will be ready to go in game 2. Here's what Les Miles had to say about the Pooka Williams suspension.
I know that there's an issue that we must discuss, and so let me get to it, if you will. First of all, there is no proper way to put it. There is no violence. Violence will not be accepted with women, period. And action was taken immediately. We felt like a strong point was made, not only with Pooka, but the team. The idea that for 7.5 months, Pooka was going through a process, and he didn't have the opportunity to spend time with his team, go to the weight room, just be a part. Pooka went through legal investigation with the legal community. Pooka also had proceedings that went through the conduct board at the university, and he basically understood very much that if he did not meet the criteria that the board asked, that this would not last long, and he really met every criteria that he could. He's taken responsibility. He's been remorseful. he's learned from this experience, as has our team. We're thankful to have him back. And again, no violence against a woman is okay. I did not make this decision, but I stand by it and see it as a right one.
All right, that was Les Miles, Jesse, from the podium, and actually opened his time with the media. About several hundred media sitting in front of him. He opened a notebook and said he had to, he knew people wanted to talk about this. He wanted to get out of the way, and I don't know how satisfying the answer was, but he did address it. It was about a 2.5 minute to 3 minute diatribe on Pooka Williams. What'd you make of it?
Yeah, it was interesting to gauge kind of the national reaction, the online reaction to Les, because I think by now a lot of people know about the heartfelt moment thing that happened at his introductory press conference, where kind of lost his train of thought. It was a little bit awkward with him on the podium. He had kind of like this little Louisiana notebook that he had written in some notes for himself, and it seemed like he sort of lost what he wanted to say in there, and so there were some pauses. And we've seen this from Les Miles. The reaction to it nationally was a lot different than I think me and some of the local media members, because we were sort of have seen this from Les over the last few months, and how sometimes in big settings like this that can sometimes happen with him. He was, much better, much more comfortable on the side session that we had with him in the afternoon, and I think kind of we've seen that from him throughout his time. But I think there was a lot of, I think you're right in that it was correct to address the situation without anybody asking about it, because that seems like always the best way to handle these things. So I think the thought in doing that was well-intentioned and correct. I think the execution of it was not great, and then Les is sort of in a tough spot because he's kind of left to answer questions about a situation that Jeff Long, the athletic director, had the final say on. And even Les Miles, I know he spoke to you in the hallway a little bit afterwards, talking about how he doesn't think that a coach should be involved in naming this sort of suspension, because obviously that's a conflict of interest. He wants a kid to play probably, or has reason for him to. And he spoke about it a little bit more at the table later, and spoke about he has three important women in his life when it comes to his 2 daughters and his wife. So a lot of these things he is not a sympathetic figure if people come to him with that. So he has his own beliefs on what should happen. But with this process, he did not want to get involved and shouldn't get involved, because a lot of the information details he is not privy to. And again, that should be an athletic director or upper administration decision whether Pooka Williams gets suspended or not, and how long that suspension is. So I understand his point. I understand what he's trying to say. It's just it's a tough situation for him to walk into, because a lot of the focus is going to be on him, and other people were not here to answer those questions.
One of those daughters was here today.
Smacker, yes.
Yeah, Smacker, who is part of the media, and kind of following him around, and went into the interview rooms with her father. So, I did think it was interesting to hear him say that a coach shouldn't be the arbiter of this, and I don't know if I've heard a coach say that before. Every coach, every college coach, every coach anywhere has to deal with disciplinary actions of their players. I've never heard a coach say publicly that. Now you could you can interpret that as passing the buck, but Les is absolutely right. I mean, this is once the legal system gets involved, it probably should be taken out of the coach's hands, and it should be the decision of a university to come up with a suspension. There's a little bit of confusion even earlier with Commissioner Bob Bowlesby, who addressed the conference policy on this, and just kind of I think a little unfortunate, I don't want to say slip of the tongue, but maybe not a full understanding of the of the situation. But I think we determined that Bob Bowlesby misspoke about the league policy.
Yeah, just to make this real quick, basically he was asked about Pooka Williams up there, and he said that KU had followed the Big 12's misconduct policy by basically they left the suspension in the hands of upper level administration on the university and not from KU athletics. I think what he's referring to there is basically that KU had a Title IX investigation into this case, and it did hand out sanctions, which Pooka Williams allowed to be made public. You know, he's going to be on probation at KU until he graduates, things like that. So basically, I think what Bob Bowlesby was saying is that there were people outside the athletic department that ruled upon Pooka Williams as to whether he should remain on campus, whether he should be a member of that. And also, I think Bob Bowlesby just sort of, you can imagine this would happen. He's up there for a long time, and he knows certain topics, realignment, are going to get asked about, so he can kind of prepare for them. Maybe he should have been more prepared for a Pooka Williams question. I just think he got caught a little bit off guard, so he at least knew that KU had gone through processes that other schools had gone through and kind of left it at that. But from my understanding and from talking to people afterwards, Jeff Long made the final call on the one-game suspension, so that is kind of the clearest way that we can say it, that yes, Pooka Williams went through the legal system, got a diversion. He went through KU's basically Title IX legal sort of system and got more sanctions, and then KU athletics added on the one-game suspension after that, and so that was something that was in Jeff Long's hands at the very end.
Okay, let's polka our way past Pooka, and there's a little bit of Les said something today in the breakout session that I hadn't heard, and that if the season started today, he would have a quarterback. Who is that?
Yeah, Thomas McVitie, and he sort of hinted at this a little bit at the end of the spring drills. He had said basically that I think the board had an edge, or Thomas McVitie, had a slightly above Carter Stanley in the regard, and so he didn't answer the quarterback question on the actual podium, but in the side session, someone had asked him about, how do you want to term your starter or whatever, and he said if it ended, if the season started today, it would be Thomas McVitie. So just a little bit more definitive in that particular quote. I think that's kind of how I've told people who had been leaning. The bottom line is this. If you are a school like Kansas and you have very limited scholarships in your first class, as we know KU did because of David Beatty and the previous staff taking a bunch of JUCO guys and blue shirting guys, having to count these scholarships in advance. If you have limited scholarships and you take on a junior college quarterback who has 2 years of eligibility, you better like the guy. You better
like him a lot.
You better think he can play. And so I think, these are the sorts of things that absolutely happen. And to me, it feels like Thomas McVitie kind of has to play his way out of the role because they have an investment in Thomas McVitie, and more of an investment than you would probably say they do in Carter Stanley. Now, that doesn't mean Carter Stanley can't win the job or that he can't be good, or, honestly, in the Big 12 and the way that KU has played lately, they need more than one quarterback that can be capable because, let's be honest, in the last 10 years ago, so they've had no quarterbacks. So if they have 2 decent ones, good for Kansas. That's great. But I would say Thomas McVitie, based off of just what they've said in the spring, what he said so far, you add on today, I would be surprised if he's not the starter in game 1 for Kansas coming up here in the fall.
Okay, started his career at the University of Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Did not play, appeared in a couple of games.
So special teams,
but not at quarterback. Got out of there, went to Mesa Community College in Arizona, and played really well. Well enough to be rivals or someone's second-rated pro-style quarterback when he was recruited by Kansas. So, nice credentials, and you got to see him in the spring. We'll see. It's a tough assignment for a newcomer to come into this league. And Big 12 doesn't have the greatest reputation when it comes to defenses, but still, for a newcomer to come into this league and be the guy, it'll be if he is the guy, a difficult assignment for him.
Yeah, well, and I wrote about this a couple weeks ago, but for Kansas, just getting that position if KU has bad quarterback play, that's an improvement, like most years. And I hate to say that, but I wrote about it, this a couple weeks ago. And Peyton Mender last year, he was probably like the 9th best Big 12 quarterback and like the 6th best quarterback Kansas has had in the last 15 years, single season. And so for KU, the bar is not that high. If they can get a guy who really can do anything, they've had guys that throw interceptions, they've had guys that take too many sacks, they've had guys that just couldn't produce, they've had, for years on end, they barely could average 20 points a game and tried to play air raid. So, he's got a tough assignment. But again, if you are Thomas McVitie, you're looking for an opportunity, and there's not many teams out there. I remember talking to him in the spring, and he talked about how his dad had like a spreadsheet, and he had every Division I program on there and which schools had starting quarterbacks coming back, which schools had backups. And basically, once you look at that and look at that whole thing, there's not many that get highlighted then that are having the starting quarterback graduate, and there's an opportunity to step in right away and be the guy, and be a school that is going to take a gamble on a JUCO transfer who, if that doesn't work out for you, that's the loss of a scholarship that could be very valuable here early on. So for Thomas McVitie, but it's also, it's tough, but it's what you want to step into. And for Kansas, the bar is pretty low when it comes to quarterback play, just because it's been so horrific lately with what they've gotten with recent coaches.
All right, Jesse, we'll end it on this. Have you seen any of Les Miles' movies?
I get asked that a lot. I see the trailers, and the trailers have not made me want to watch the whole movies or reach into my pocketbook to watch the movies. Somebody mentioned this to me, and I'm sure maybe the bosses will hear this back, but they said you should just expense it. Should I just expense The Last Whistle onto my account to make sure that I can be
his latest movie?
So I can be a full Les Miles beat reporter to take in all that I can about Les Miles. I need to go ahead and put the $7.99 charge on my iTunes.
You watch that one, and I'll watch The Challenger Disaster, where he plays Nelson, the NASA official who should have known better. So 4-movie career for Les Miles is temporarily suspended as he tries to. He's the latest in the line of Kansas football coaches, and probably the most interesting.
I say this with all due respect to Les Miles. I heard someone who watched The Challenger, and they said that he was one of the best actors in it. With all due respect to Les Miles, that did not make me want to watch the movie. You know what I mean? So that could mean his acting is great, and maybe he's way better than he should be based off not having this as a career, but it doesn't say much for maybe the other actors in the movie with him.
Okay, so I always end this by asking our listeners to follow Jesse Newell on on the various social platforms, but I will also refer you to Rotten Tomatoes this time. So, Jesse, thanks for hanging out.
All right, thanks, Blair.
How would you compare your inheritance at KU to that of OSU in 01?
Yeah, I think we have a better talent base here at Kansas than I had when I went to Oklahoma State. I can tell you that the things that happened. We were allowed to recruit to a very significant number at Oklahoma State, recruited very well to start, and I think that that's the same thing here. I think that we'll recruit well over time, and I think you'll see that this Kansas team is much more talented than their record shows.
You've been listening to SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast presented by the Kansas City Star. Links to the stories we discussed can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Thanks to Kathy Liu and Leah Becerra for putting together today's show, and be sure to tune in on Tuesday when Kansas State takes the stage at Big 12 Media Days.